Hello, everybody. Kay Crystal Griffith here, and welcome back for your daily digest of emotions, wisdom, and your body. Don't forget, your emotions are your body's wisdom. So today we're going to delve into how your emotions are affecting you, body, soul, and spirit, as we are each day for 2021. Here's your disclaimer. I am not a doctor. I do not play one at any social media platform, but I do have my master's in education to emotional trauma certifications, as well as some inner healing certifications. And I'm just here to encourage you, edify you, and really give you some new education on your emotions and how they work. So what's our verse in our word for today? Our word for today is numb, being emotionally numb or emotional numbness. You could have any version of those. So did you know that the Bible has a number of verses actually including the word numb? I was a little surprised by that. There are many synonyms for it as well, such as asleep, deadened, dull, petrified. That one kind of grabbed my attention. There's 3 instances of that in the Bible, petrified. I don't want my emotions to be petrified. How about you? This would be bad, right? So what does numb mean? It means deprived of the power of sensation, deprived of feeling or responsiveness, unfocused, ungrounded, and really feeling emotionally numb or some general lack of emotion can be a symptom of several different medical conditions or even a side effect of medications. And a lot of people think that even depression, it can be a side effect of several medications. So it's really important to have those reviewed with your doctor on a routine basis. Numbness and emotional numbness can also be a sense of isolation or emotional disconnect from the rest of the world. The numbness can be absolutely unbearable for many who experience it. And one client claims it as, the world around me often seems slightly superficial. Like I'm going to be going through the motions, but I can't connect to my environment. It makes me feel as if there was an analog TV static in my brain and I'm unable to communicate or think deeply. Almost like there's a barrier to getting to those emotions. If you had any childhood trauma that was too overwhelming to your emotional systems, or if you were told to repress compassionate masculinity, or if you came from a family that shunned emotional expressions, then you may be walking around in emotional numbness. Emotional numbness is a defense mechanism that's employed by your mind to avoid intense and overwhelming emotions such as fear, hatred, jealousy, even grief. And when you go emotionally numb, you lose the ability to feel and experience your emotions on a psychological and emotional level. And in this sense, emotional numbness is often clinically connected with dissociation, which is the dissociation from one's memories, identity, environment, body, or even your senses. So there's no positive in here for this one. It's all negative. So we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to get you in a better place so you can feel your emotions, right? Now, let's talk about how this is affecting your brain per se. So individuals experiencing depersonalization or numbness should typically show a reduced neural, which are your neurons and your neuroplasticity in your brain, activity in areas of the brain associated with emotional processing, particularly the left anterior insula. So there's actually scans that can see this numbness happening on a long-term basis within your brain. Now, for emotional numbness, depression and anxiety are 2 of the most common causes. Several levels of acute elevated stress and nervousness can also trigger feelings of emotional numbness. Post-traumatic stress disorder, which can also be tied to depression and anxiety, also that lack of an escape plan trajectory for fight, flight, freeze, faint, or fawn, right? That can also cause you to feel numb, as if you can collapse or barrier off or decompartmentalize or compartmentalize. That's the word I was looking for. Compartmentalize those emotions away so you don't feel them, right? Now, let's talk about stress hormones for a second. Those can flood your system and often cause a variety of different reactions within your body that can lead to emotional numbness. So for example, stress hormones can affect the limbic system. The limbic system is located near the center of your brain and is mainly responsible for all your emotions. Now, those emotions then tie in from the frontal lobe, the amygdala, the hippocampus, thalamus, and a variety of other places. So the stress hormones can also affect other hormones in your body, which can in turn affect your mood. Both effects can cause you to feel numb. So you have the stress hormones flooding your body, then you have this emotional interaction, and then they begin to cycle into each other. Now, in some cases, your body can also become so stressed that you become overtaxed by your emotions and physically fatigued. This is really true when you are in a crisis situation where it seems to last much longer than you were expecting, than your body was expecting, maybe even the doctors were expecting. But because that crisis has continued going long term, and this is very true when you are the caregiver for a medically complex child or medically complex spouse, something of that medical crisis where you're envisioning it's only going to last until we can get through the crisis and then we can kind of pick back up where we were, but then that crisis lasts so much longer than what was expected. Okay, that's what we're talking about there. So those stress hormones then begin to affect other hormones in your body that affect your mood, and then they all just cause you to be numb. And then you're so overtaxed by that numbness, by all the flood of increase, that you have this depletion that happens of both your emotional and your physical energy that then creates a whole nother state to your emotional numbness. So this really can kind of filter out almost like a spider web pretty quickly, actually. So emotional numbness can lead to dysfunctional coping mechanisms, which could be obsessive compulsive, which we talked about just a couple of days ago, mild to severe depression, spiritual emptiness, really questioning whether for you, maybe God even exists. If he did, why does he have me here? Oftentimes we're asking the wrong question when we ask that. It's more of what can we learn while we're here, and how do we learn it quick enough to move through this as quickly as possible instead of just take it from me. And that's a hard place to get to sometimes, especially when you're in the middle of crisis, and that's really what you need, is you want that crisis to be over. And it's a really hard conversation to have with God, but the more that we're honest with him, the more that we're aware of those feelings, the more that we can really help get that help that we need to process those feelings, the better off we're going to be emotionally as well. Now, this emotional numbness can also lead to an inability to enjoy life, inability to form close and fulfilling relationships, a disconnection from your inner self, confusion, irritability, fatigue, addictions, chronic illness, somatic illnesses, which are supposedly illnesses produced by the mind, but in fact, what we're seeing is they're not just psychosomatic, to where your psychological takes over your physiological, but your body is actually changed and shifts because of those chemical releases we just talked about. And now your body is triggered by that and basically flips a switch in the brain, and the brain has gone into an overdose of fight, flight, freeze, faint, or fawn. And so it thinks it's protecting you for some reason in that somatic illness. So there's actually a physiological component to that as well. Now, what if we have too much of this emotional numbness? What really happens here? Well, I want to revisit just for a second. Some of those medications that we talked about can also cause numbness, and they're usually the most common culprits of numbness. And so super important to really check those medications if you're being treated already for anxiety or depression. So those medications can affect how the brain processes your mood and your emotions. So that would be step one. If you're on any of those medications, you might want to get them checked, because it's not normal. This is not a healthy side effect, and this is an issue that does need to get addressed. You don't want to stay in emotional numbness. That can change your neuroplasty of your brain to stay there, and we definitely don't want that for you. Now, emotional numbness also stems from ongoing issues. Perhaps you're in an abusive situation. Maybe you were as a child, and now you are, or possibly could be as an adult. That could be in an abusive situation with a friend, with a work, a colleague, even a spouse. You could be in an abusive situation, and that abuse could look physical, emotional, mental, sexual, psychological, spiritual, even financial. So there's 7 different types of abuse. And so it's super important that you do understand that and you begin to ask more questions about your relationships. I've got some great resources that can help guide you on those questions. Kind of ask yourself, ask of your situations that you're in, and really begin to delve into that to get a better clarity around that. So reach out to me. I'm happy to share those with you. Now, another one is feeling alienated or disconnected from one or both of your parents. When we don't have that initial attachment as a child, that can become an issue as well. And so especially if you have one or both parents that have no idea how to attach to a child, then that becomes an ongoing issue for you as an adult. Now, another one is being punished, or whether indirectly or directly, by just expressing your emotions. There have been many times that people have heard buck up, suck up, move on, stop those tears. Boys don't cry. That is not true. And so none of those are true. And so important that those are really invalidating the emotions and the feelings that the person's having in that moment, that it would be better to say, hey, I see that you're really struggling here, or talk to me about it. What's going on? But you will usually hear those kind of phrases of buck up, suck up, move on from people who have never dealt with their own emotions. And so then it becomes a bigger issue. So they're staying dysregulated, then they're passing on that dysregulation and teaching that dysregulation of their brain and their body and their emotions to their children. And that perpetuates a generational cycle right there. Now, if you have also been severely traumatic experience that maybe you've experienced, maybe that's a fire or you saw something. I vividly remember actually being asked to smoke by my best friend, and I had ridden my bicycle for like 5 miles all the way uphill where we were living at the time. And got there, so excited to see her. It was the first time my mom let me like do this big trip by myself, right? Got there and my friend goes, okay, come on, we're gonna go visit with my friends. And I'm like, okay. So we rode off into the woods to visit these quote unquote friends of hers that I'd never seen at school ever. So these were not her normal friends. And then she pulls out cigarettes and starts smoking, and they are all smoking. And I'm looking at her like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, come on, you smoke. I'm like, I don't, no, why would you do that? Like, no. and it stinks. You know? And she's like, well, I don't need to be friends with you at this point if you're not going to do that, in the catty little 6th, 7th grade way. And so I got back on my bike and I rode the 5 miles home, and I almost died on the way back home because I had 3 cars almost hit me. It was a very traumatic experience in that moment, not just for my best friend, but what I went through to get to her and to have this exciting trip, my first official one, and then for that to be it. And then honestly, the 3 cars almost hit me on the way home. That seemed less intensive than actually going to my best friend's. But the things that we think of as a kid that are so traumatic. Now, in the grand scheme of things, was me being asked to smoke a cigarette traumatic? Not really. As an adult looking back, it wasn't. But as a kid, oh my gosh, she and I were never the same after that. I lost my best friend. And that in itself is traumatic for a kiddo to lose their best friend. And especially if that happens in high school as well, where you've been friends for so long and then you lose your best friend. And that can create a whole host of emotional issues for our kiddos. So in this time of our kids are not able to go and to play and to hang and to have play dates and have dates and all these kind of things that they are typically used to doing, we do need to be a little more supportive of them and understanding they're walking through a really tough time right now. With what we've got going on with the quarantine and how schools are related and in session and out of session, and who knows what they're going to be session next week. So we really want to support them in really identifying our own feelings so we can help them identify theirs. Now, emotional numbness is more than just a blue day, folks. This is more like a blue day that's on repeat, ongoing, day after day. And so here are some of the significant signs of emotional numbness that you should look for. Inability to express strong, negative, or even positive emotions. When you're numb, it's not just about the negative, it's also about the positive. You're not able to feel any of those emotions. It's an inability to fully participate in life, like feeling like you're a passive observer, feeling like that life is a dream, a sense of unreality, living on autopilot. You get up, you do your thing, you go to bed, you get up, you do your thing, you go to bed, and there's nothing in between, and there's no feeling or attachment to it. a lack of interest in activities others might find enjoyable. Now, mind you, you may not find a zip line enjoyable. I did it once. That was all I needed to do. They all can have fun. I'll take the pictures from the ground, right? But that doesn't mean that I am emotionally numb to it. That just means, honestly, I might have better sense than they do. Now, feeling distance from others, the tendency to withdraw from friends or family, emotions are really only felt as in the body as sensations, but not by the mind or anywhere else for that matter. And they could be completely muted in the body, maybe even show up as an illness. I've often said in some of these that feelings buried alive never die. They don't. They will come out as illnesses, as emotions, as stress factors. And that's where that somatic illness comes from. And when you have certain situations arise in your body and they cannot find a physiological reason for it, it is often always tied to emotions. And so we have to deal with the emotions so we can deal with the illness. Now, there could be also a dislike of people who express strong emotions. Why? Because you don't understand why they're so strong. They're probably not strong. They're probably just emotions. But because you have been numb to yours for so long, they feel like they're coming across as super strong. Kind of like our teenagers who tell us, like when we give our warnings, and they're like, stop yelling at me. And you're like, oh, I can show you what yelling is. That's not yelling. And so even to come across strongly takes them aback if you are walking in emotional numbness. Now, not feeling anything in situations that would usually generate a strong reaction. You just got in a car accident, or your house burned down, or you found out a loved one passed away, or you can't get to a loved one who's very, very sick, or being told that, there's another quarantine that's been extended, right? Those can generate very strong emotions. How did you feel about any of those? What would you feel about any of those? Worth asking those questions. Then there could be panic or terror when strong emotions usually do break through because you aren't used to them. Feeling empty inside. And the last one is physical, emotional numbness or flatness. Your best bet is to ask your family, your friends who know you well. So would you say I interact with strong emotions, or how do you think I have emotions? Like, do you see me as an emotional person? Like, do I have ups and downs? So this is not like drama emotion. This is like, am I just interacting with emotions? And get their take on it. And ask more than just one or two people, and so you can kind of get a good, probability of what's in reality going on for you. Now, how do we stop this? How do we make our emotions come alive again or awaken, right? Well, first of all, remember, shutting off emotions is problematic. Why? Because you're not just shutting down negative, you're also shutting down positive. And that includes pleasure and engaging in positive interactions. So we definitely want to work on awakening our emotions. So the first step is to identify. Awareness. We talk about this all the time. Awareness is key. If you are not aware of what's going on in your body or not even happening in your body, which would be your emotional responses, right? You can't even acknowledge it. You can't be accountable for it. You can't be aware of it. So we have to identify that this is an issue to begin with. And that may require a therapist to discuss this with, or even a doctor to review those medications that you may already be on for any ailment that you are taking. Also, you want to reach out to those who love you and create a safe environment for you. It's kind of like if you need financial advice, you don't go to your poorest friend for that financial advice, right? So you want to go to somebody who's succeeding in that area. So we really want to make sure that you're not going to ask people who already have their own emotions cut off, because they're not going to see that there's any issue, because they don't realize that they themselves have an issue. So make sure you're asking the right people. Best results: exercise daily. We got to get those emotions flowing, those hormones flowing, get plenty of sleep, minimize your stress to the best of your ability. Now, admittedly, we all have our children at home right now, and that is really difficult to do. As my child's in the other room on a conference call, and I've had to her about 14 times. Learn to identify and express your emotions. For those who have been emotionally numb for an extended period of time, it can be difficult to identify or process those different emotions. So using that feelings wheel that you received from me when you signed up at kcrystalgriffith.com, I want you to copy that several times, post them around your home, and then when you see it, stop and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And really begin to tune into that. And the more that you can do that, the faster you're going to have a better experience with your emotions. I'm not trying to tell you to invalidate or fix those emotions. That's not what we're doing with this exercise. We're just identifying them. We're allowing them to be, right? So what are our verses today? Our verses really are revealing anyone who has been numb. I really wanted to include verses that speak to you so you know you're not alone in that numbness, right? I also want you to notice that anxiety and that feeling overwhelm in these verses. So there's an anxiety, there's an overwhelming feeling, and then there's numbness, right? And so all of them converge in these verses. And so you're not alone when you are feeling numbness. So the first one is Psalm 38:8. I am numb with pain and severely battered. That also means abused, okay? I groan loudly because of the anxiety that I feel. So they are feeling that anxiety, that pressure, but not as an emotion, as a sense. Remember we talked earlier, you can feel it in your body, but not in your head. That's what they're talking about there. And that's from David. Psalm 143:4. Therefore, my spirit is overwhelmed and weak within me, wrapped in darkness. My heart grows numb within me. So David was a number one person who was constantly on the go and constantly being tracked by Saul and his men and a variety of other people. He was really the warrior king in essence. And so he was constantly in battle, not only with those on the battlefield, but with himself often. And so you're seeing that in those verses right there. So you're not alone. Now, Ephesians 5:14 gives you some hope, though. I want to encourage you. For this reason, it says, awake, sleeper. And that's where your emotions are. They're sleeping right now. They're hidden. And arise from the dead. Awaken, right? And Christ will shine on you. And so when we allow our emotions to rise to the surface, then they can shine, right? So how do you use this new information about emotional numbness and apply it to your life? Remember, wisdom is the hearing and application, that knowledge process of receiving what you've heard today and then applying it. So here are your 3 questions. How has emotional numbness been showing up in your life? Has it been positive? Has it been negative? Have you been trying to use it as a positive and it's really a negative? And how can you be transformed by this emotion, good or bad, by wisdom, understanding, and knowledge as you walk in it moving forward? The fact is, we're going to encounter many, many things in our life that are traumatic experiences. But in that moment, are you going to shut off your emotions? Or are you going to allow them to be validated and aware and awakened and be able to receive them as normal? Because you should have emotions when you're in a traumatic experience, and you should be allowed to have those emotions. So are you giving yourself permission to feel? So today I want to teach you a little trick. This is called a collarbone statement. We do a lot of what's called EFT, emotional freedom technique, and tapping in sessions with my clients. And so what I want you to do is find your collarbones. It might be a little bit tender. You can tap on them or you can rub them in a circle. And when we make declarations, we're doing this as a kinesthetic movement here. And we can say something to the effect of, I am allowed to feel my feelings. I'm allowed to feel my emotions. I trust my emotions. Okay. And so you say that 2 or 3 times and you're doing that and you're actually activating that kinesthetic within your body. It's pretty cool how that works. So I want to just encourage you today to join us for more tomorrow. You're going to find out tomorrow. We're going to talk about yearning. And my system has decided to tell me the movies. I have no idea why. So tomorrow's word is yearning, when we're yearning to feel those emotions, but we just can't. So let's learn some more about that tomorrow on More for Your Emotions, Wisdom, and Your Body. Join me at K Crystal Griffith to receive more insights and that feelings wheel we discussed today if you haven't received it already. You guys have a blessed day. Take care.